Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 250. I'm delighted to welcome onto the podcast today, James Redden. James, how are we doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Ben. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, mate. I'm
Good,
excited
good.
about this one because it's been
Hey,
a pretty hectic period for you recently, hasn't it?
yeah, it's been a full-on, let's say, 8 weeks. But no, thank you for the invite. It's great to be here. And I don't know if there's anything being the 250th, but I'm taking it as a badge of honor being the 250th. It's impressive, mate.
100%. I know I had to step up and deliver a top
I don't
guest.
know about
So
that. I don't
that's
know
what we
about
went
that.
for. No, I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for freeing up the time. I know, like I
Yeah.
have mentioned, it has been a bit of a crazy period. So I want to get into that in a little bit. But I want to start where we always start on these. Let's just hear about you and your story. What's led you up to your current roles?
So I went to uni, went to Loughborough Uni at school, did an undergrad and then a master's there in exercise physiology. Undergrad was sports science and maths. I was quite good at maths, but didn't really like it. And I really liked sports science, but I wasn't that good at it. So combined the two. And then I did XPhys as my master's. That was good, and it was great. Really, really enjoyed that 4 years. And then was really lucky to come out of that into an internship at Tottenham. That was 2011. So they advertised through the university, and yeah, I got an internship with the first team, which was brilliant. It was such an amazing learning experience that. And then I was at Tottenham for 8 years, so I stayed at Tottenham for 8 years, hung around long enough, so they gave me a full-time job, and yeah, like just an amazing 8 years. Learned so much, worked with some great people, great coaches, great players, and was lucky enough to kind of between some stuff in the academy, stuff as an intern with the first team, and then finished up as the senior first team sports scientist for the last 4 years. And yeah, saw 4 different managers and just got the whole range of everything at Tottenham. It was a really, really great learning experience for me. And then in 2019, I left Spurs and came to Luton. That's when I came to Luton as head of sports science when Luton first came up into the Championship. So that was 4 years ago. And yeah, that was a great step up. Like I probably got a bit of a sheltered experience of football being at Tottenham. Like it was an amazing experience, but we moved to the new training ground and the new stadium and everything, and sometimes got referred to as Disneyland, that place, because it was a bit like it's such an amazing place, but it's not. It's probably not the norm, or it's the 1% in football. So it's been so great coming to Luton and seeing a little bit of a different side and probably a smaller team and a bit more responsibility. And did the head of sports science role for 2 years over that crazy COVID period, and then moved into a different role, head of performance development, which overarches the cover a little bit more removed from the first team, which again has been brilliant. Like kind of a bit more of a macro view of things, and being able to work with the club to develop as a club rather than just kind of going game to game working with the first team.
How's that influenced your day to day then, James, in terms of your responsibilities on a daily basis at the training ground?
So it's a little bit wider spread. It's a little bit more unknown, kind of changes a lot day to day. When you're the head of sports science role, you come in, coaches meeting, medical meeting, activation, warm up, and kind of go through a similar routine and then go around the matches. Now, I support the first team, kind of filling gaps where they need to do quite a bit of early stage rehab, linking with our consultant nutritionist to make sure the nutrition side's going really well. And then a lot of the role is working with our younger players that are training with the first team to make sure they're getting the physical development they need to hopefully become an asset for the club, play for the first team and become an asset for the club. So some days that's going out and doing extra work on the field. Some days that's staying in the gym and doing a bit. Some days I'm sitting back and writing a nutrition philosophy for the club, So it's been great. And like the academy stuff is really get your teeth into stuff, like stuff that we can make really great gains at Luton. So I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it a bit more. Love doing the day to day, but that step back and a bit more of a strategic, a little bit, but maybe that's overplaying it. Just a little bit more of a macro view and seeing where we can get the most bang for our buck as a club. It's been a really good learning for me.
I suppose it's tying in with, I know it's something you probably touch on in terms of the journey the club have come on so far in these last few years, but also the vision of, I'm guessing, where they want to go in the next few years as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Getting someone in that, like yourself, in that role.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I think the primary is the first team winning games. You know, the first team need to win games and hopefully progress up the leagues. But under that, we need to have a really nice foundation where the club is sustainable, developing players from within, producing assets which might bring the club money. You know, we're a club with a smaller budget than other clubs around us, so that's a great way for the club to bring assets into the first team, but also bring money into the club. And there's probably been over the last 4 years such a great rise in the first team. That stuff has maybe not progressed at the same rate. You know, very difficult. Club have had 4 promotions in 7 years or 8 years. You know, so it's difficult for the rest of the club to catch up with that. But that work being done now and developments to the training ground and a new stadium hopefully sets Luton Town up for the next 30, 40 years. You know, to be a really good, effective football club.
Yeah, it's been an incredible rise, hasn't it? And I mean, even obviously this last season just gone as we record this, they sealed the promotion. But even before that, the few seasons before that have been super, super successful in terms of the finishes in the league and that as well, haven't they? So it's probably a really hard question, probably not one that you can put up with 1 or 2 answers to. But where do you see the difference? What's been the difference to that, do you think?
The difference between the leagues?
Between the leagues, but also just with between, like, what's the reason they've been pushing so high with the lower budget and all the rest of it that comes with the club? It's an incredible few years, isn't it?
Yeah, I think first of all, the club, it's really well run, you know, and it's kind of an obvious thing to say, but they run the club really well in a really sustainable way with a strong culture. And that culture goes from me to the players, to the academy, to the groundsmen, you know, and they've managed to keep that. And by the way, I've been really lucky to jump on board with this journey. Like that, I jumped on board 4 years ago. The club were doing amazing things before then. There's guys that have been here since the conference who've like been with the club that whole way. So I felt really lucky to jump on board that journey. And as soon as you come in, you appreciate the culture. And if you're on board with that, then that's pushing, driving, improving, and not really doing that with financials, you know, being innovative and hard work, being a good person, you know, that they're values that the club value as a player and as a practitioner, you know, like, and the players group have really got that as part of them, hard work and good people, you know. And when you run a club well and you've got those values, I think that's a real recipe for success. You know, it sounds easy. It's not easy to implement, but if you can, like, things kind of fall into place, or it feels that way, you know, like, well run with good people.
I really like that you said that, because the episode that we put out last week was with Matt Wilmot, and it was all about culture and what's more important, the culture or the program and all that sort of stuff. And that just ties in with that, doesn't it? It's so important.
Yeah, like the culture, like, and someone asked me the other day, like, it's not really explicitly written down here. You know, I probably couldn't, if you asked me Luton's culture, I couldn't tell you in 3 words, or, you know, whatever gets summed up and put on a wall. But it's like, it's kind of inherent about the place. And I was thinking the other day about the Kenilworth Road, like the stadium. If you're a practitioner or a player that signs up to come in and that being your home stadium, it's like implicit in, right, this is what we are as a club, you know. Like, we might not be pretty, but like, we really value our history. We really value hard work, and the stadium's like the embodiment of that, you know. Like, if you turn up to that stadium and go, "Nah, this isn't for me," then you're not right for our culture, you know. So like, the stadium's a real kind of leveler for us.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Really good to hear. On top of that, though, obviously going through that, the long season, the promotion, you then go away with England, because a role of yours is consultant physical performance coach for the England men's under 21s as well, which I'm sure a lot of people will have seen the success that they had in the Euros as well. So that's something I want to dive into. You've had the success with Luton, and then also going away and getting that with England. Give us a little bit of perspective on the sort of emotions and everything that you went through with those 2 achievements.
I think I'm probably still processing it a bit. Genuinely, I think I'm probably still kind of leveling out on it a little bit. Luton was amazing, and that playoff final is, I think it's the best game in football. You know, I think it's kind of not at that high level where there's a lot of media around it. You know, but it's proper football. It was amazing. Wembley Stadium, and with a group of people, players and staff that deserve it so much. You know, like that was a real amazing feeling. Then I had with the celebrations and the bus tour and all that. Then I had 6 days, and then I was in with England. So I think I was still coming down off that when I came into England. And luckily, we'd done a lot of work, and the FA are brilliant at this, at planning and organising. So everything was kind of in place. So that week leading up to it was, I could enjoy the celebrations because we knew we had our ducks in a row with England.
Yeah.
And probably was quite nice to go again, you know, to go like, okay, let's go again and let's try this new challenge, you know. And then the tournament was amazing. Like, again, really lucky with England. I jumped in halfway through the qualifier, and I started in March 2020. So I jumped on the back of the last qualifying games, and we got qualified, and then was involved in the planning. So I feel really lucky to have jumped on board with that. But the whole tournament was brilliant. Like, I've never experienced tournament football before. The group were brilliant. They'd kind of come of age at a great time and matured to be really, really top professionals. Coaching staff were great. The organisation was great, and I loved the whole month. And I've said to people since I've got back, it was probably the first time in my career where I was able to enjoy it in the moment. Like, I was every day, I was going, "This is great," you know. And we're working hard and doing stuff, but going, "I don't want to go home. Like, I'm having a great time here. Like, let's go again." And we're winning games, and the lads were like, you know, it was. I feel really lucky to have been involved in it.
Brilliant. I want to focus on this from a practitioner perspective now as well, because we have spoke about this a little bit with a few other people, but the club role, being day to day in the club, seeing players all the time, compared to that international role where you've had a period of time there at a tournament where you spend a little bit longer with players. But a lot of the time you're getting players for a few weeks and then they're going back to the clubs, aren't they? How have you found that as a practitioner in terms of your responsibilities and how that works?
Yeah, it's completely different, you know. And like, I've learned so much over the last 18 months in that role. Like, it's almost like a polar opposite role, you know. Like, in club football, and by the way, the tournament felt a lot more like club football because we had, so that kind of felt more normal. But and on the camps, there's a real intensity to the camps, you know, which you can't sustain in club football, but you can do for 10 days. And the intensity is great because you can be effective, but you need to be effective, you know, like effective players with every conversation, you know, whether that's building on relationships and talking about nutrition and, what about if you got a chef when you went away? Like, do you think that would help you, you know, and trying to help these lads develop as professionals for themselves, but that also feeds back into England, you know, and every conversation has to be effective, and you have to try and squeeze as much as you can out of those 10 days with that group as possible. And actually, probably the physical on my side has to take a step back.
Yeah.
In that situation, you know, the coaches have got a lot to get across in probably 2 games in 9 or 10 days. So the physical, like, there's certain individuals and certain players that need it, but actually they come in from playing games and they're fit and they're ready to go, you know. So in the club space, you're always pushing, and here we're pushing. Like, if we have a 3-week, work hard. Like, we want to physically improve, get better. In the national team, like, that's not that. You have to park that part of your brain and go, like, let's prime them, let's get them ready for the game, you know. And if we get everyone in and send everyone back to their clubs in a good place, we've done a really good job, you know, and 1-2 games at the side of it. That's success, you know, rather than excellent physical outputs in games, you know, because we're just looking after them for 10 days. So it always takes me a day or two when I get in to switch between, I don't think we've done enough there, I don't think we've pushed them. And then you realise we're not here to push them, you know, we're here to look after them, get everyone on the same page, let the coaches prepare them, and keep them available for 2 games, you know. So I really hope that the clubs think we've done a good job of that. Like, that's the aim, you know, and it's a really strong objective for the coaching staff and myself, you know, send the boys back in a good place, and hopefully a little bit more knowledge and a little bit more insight into the physical side of of what they need to be top international footballers.
Yeah, brilliant. What I'm interested in as well, especially with this change in your role at Luton now as well, is this some of the skills that you feel you've developed or require more in those two circumstances. So being at Luton in this role that you're in now, and also with England, being on a, when I say shorter term, I just mean the amount of time that you're spending with players. What are some of the key skills, attributes that you as a practitioner, you feel like that you need to utilize the most?
I think so. England, the things I've learned over the last 18 months in England is the beauty of international football is you've got time to plan and organise. You don't have that in club football, but that's so powerful, you know. And if you use that time, when you're then on camp, everything runs so smoothly, you know. So I think in club football, you kind of get used to doing things on the cuff because you have to, because a player comes in ill and you have to change things and adapt numbers and stuff. And so that's quite a good skill set to develop as a practitioner. But with the national team, you've got the time, so you can say like, no, okay, this is going to be the recovery modalities we do on day 1, day 2, day 3, and like we're going to periodize that, and it's all going to be really organized. And because we know we've got them for this amount of time, we know exactly what the activation and the warm up can be each day. That took me a while to get into because I was just used to being like, oh, it's all right, we'll just turn up and, you know, the players, and we'll see how they're feeling and then we'll react. And actually, once you get into the mindset of actually planning an organization, that makes that ship sail so much smoother, you know. And especially in the 21s is a relatively big organization. You've got lots of staff and the communication is only on camp. So you need to be able to work well with people in the short term and have effective relationships. Planning helps those relationships be effective, you know, when maybe you haven't got that long-term relationship with the people. So yeah, and the FA do that brilliantly. You know, they plan brilliantly and they're brilliant at that. With the Luton role, like I think the and probably marries up with the 21s as well, is like the life outside of the first team and winning, you know, in football. There's so many merits to working in a football club, and it's not just 3 points on a Saturday, you know. And when I say about speaking to the Premier League footballer about getting a nutritionist, you know, I take real satisfaction in them then hopefully improving themselves as professionals and going away. And that's nothing to do with 3 points or winning the Euros or getting promoted, you know, but it's probably as enjoyable, you know, and working with the academy to develop a real good, robust physical program. So when the boys come up to train with the first team at Luton, they stay there and they don't bounce back because they get a soft tissue injury or anything like that. There's real satisfaction in that, you know, and I think probably the intrinsic rewards from that rather than the extrinsic ones of 3 points or, you know, external validation. I've learned because that's part of the role, but also, yeah, maybe with age and experience, you kind of take those wins a little bit more than you take the 3 points wins, you know.
I think a lot of it from what you're discussing, it's you knowing where you fit into that support for staff and players as well, isn't it? Obviously,
Yeah.
you've already said it's very different from club to country, but
Yeah.
it sounds like you're just aware of where you can have that impact.
Yeah, I think that's you know, as a club grows, like Luton club grows, like not everyone is the guy driving the ship, you know, but everyone has an impact on that, and I think that's super important, you know, like without everyone, then the ship doesn't keep going that way, you know. So yeah, I think, like I said to someone the other day about being a polyfiller coach and filling in the gaps, you know, just being the guy that, but there's real merit in that, you know, there's real merit in being that guy, you know, because like it takes a certain skill set and it takes an experience to be able to go, yeah, I can do early stage rehab, but also I can look after nutrition, or if you need me to take a warm up, I'll do that, you know, and then go away and adapt to, okay, this is what international football needs. It's very different to this, you know, like, yeah, I suppose I feel quite proud that I can adapt like that.
I suppose also from a player perspective, that's really powerful for them to know that you're the person to go to for the list of like areas that they want to discuss as well. That it's not that you just look after this area, but they can come to you with different questions. And I suppose that crosses over to both, doesn't it? Working with a club and working with an international team.
Yeah, I think the big one with the national team is I'm the only guy, you know, so I'm the nutrition guy, the GPS guy, the warm-up guy, the gym
Yeah.
guy. So you need to be able to be strong in all those areas. And those players ask such intelligent questions because they want to get better and stuff. So you need to be across it, you know. And footballers can weed out jokers if they hear one, you know. So you need to be genuine with your answers as well. So yeah, I think like there's I try not to sound like an old guy because I'm 34, but I've been in football for 10 years or whatever. Things go up and down, you know. So when I first joined, there wasn't loads of sports scientists, fitness coaches, whatever you want to call them. So everyone was a generalist and could do everything.
Yeah.
And then over the years, we've got specialists and, okay, this is our GPS guy and this is our gym guy. But I think there's real merit in everyone being able to do everything and having a department where if any 4 people need to take a warm-up, they can, or come in and do the gym session, or download the GPS, or help out with supplements. You know, I think there's real merit in that, and you can still be excellent at all of them. You know, like I don't think you need to narrow yourself down to one area. You know, like it limits you a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, that's a great point. The other thing I wanted to touch on is, as we record this, we're sort of at the time of year where, well, we're edging towards the new season, but we've finished the season. It's been a time where a lot of coaches have reflected on the previous season, probably the performance of the team, but also the program that they've been running throughout the season. Do you have and I'm probably more talking about the club environment now, but do you have like a practice that you would go through to look at the previous season and what that would look like in terms of changes going forward as well?
Yeah, so I think it's really important for me to say that at Luton, Jared Roberts-Smith runs the first team program, so I'm there to support him. So this is kind of really his bag. So I hope he doesn't mind me kind of touching on what he does. But yeah, at the end of the season, we'll get together as a department and review what's gone well, what's gone badly, how we think we need support as individuals, and how we can develop as individuals, but how we can also develop the department. And review that, and then that's almost like the check-in at the end of each season. You know, we look back to the previous one and hopefully use that check-in at the end of the season to drive some things for pre-season. And then I think it's a continual process as well, isn't it, across the season? You know, like if you've got good communication between staff, you're kind of constantly reviewing and iterating and improving the program as things go. And like that might be from me looking at periodized nutrition program, you know, and going like, the lads they're not taking the beta-alanine. Like, why are we putting the beta-alanine out? You know, or how can we drive that? You know, and then at the end of the season, taking a bit more of a step back and going, okay, that didn't really work, but we improved it across the season by doing this. Let's try that from the outset next year. You know, so there's definitely a reflection. I think there was a reflection as a club across the season before where we got into the playoffs, but we kind of maxed out to get into the playoffs and lost in the semi-finals to Huddersfield. We were really fortunate in the season just gone that we'd got into the playoffs with a few games to spare. And Rob, our manager, spoken a lot about how the club approached that period where we were already in the playoffs, but we had 3 games to manage ourselves for the playoffs started. Like, we didn't want to pick up any injuries, but we wanted to keep winning, and how that, like, I think the club did a really good job of looking back on what we did before and going, maybe we didn't quite get that right, or we picked up a few injuries and we probably needed a bigger squad and more squad depth because this championship's so brutal. You know, you're gonna pick up issues. So how can we account for that? Maybe have a few more players to select from. You know, so we're not tied to 12 players or so. So yeah, I think that's another way of getting a little win as a club, isn't it? You know, good processes, reviewing things, improving them. I think that's the way to succeed, isn't it? Kind of constant iteration.
Definitely. Does it make it harder in a way though, having such a successful year last year and getting that promotion? Then you're reflecting on the program with your staff and looking at it as from a physical perspective and going, right, what changes do we need to make? Are there any changes we need to make? But in the back of your mind, you've just had an incredible year, promotion. Is it not just like too tempting to go, right, cut, paste? Or are you just constantly looking at that and saying, right, what do we stick? Do we twist? Like, what's the difference?
Yeah, I think probably maybe the promotion makes it a bit easier in terms of we know we need to go up a level.
Yeah.
You know, we know everything needs to go up a level because we've gone up a level, literally. So I think that kind of probably keeps you honest, you know, and going like, wow, we've got like Jared's got to set a program up now that prepares the first team squad to tolerate Premier League football and not just tolerate, be competitive, because it's one of our strengths. You know, our physicality is one of our strengths. So we can't just survive. We've got to be good at it. So I think probably there's the two elements of it. What didn't go great last season? How can we improve that? But also now we're here. What can we add on? You know, what can we add on that maybe we've wanted to add on for a bit, but haven't been able to. Now's a great opportunity to take this up a gear. And Jared's been great at that. Checked in with all of us at the end of the season and said, like, what do you think we need as a club? What do you think we need as a department to improve? He got a big list together, went to the club, and the club have been brilliant. The club have been amazing, you know, supporting us and backing us and supporting that, which shows trust in us, you know, and also investment in the club. You know, we've got an amazing new gym space, and we've just been lucky enough to kit it out with some great kit that we needed, you know. So that's going to help us this year, but it's also going to help us in the next 10 years. You know, it's a Premier League facility now, that is. So yeah, that's how we've got to improve. We've got to improve.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. You mentioned sort of the physicality there, and we've talked about that rise throughout the leagues, and everyone will be aware of the sort of demands put on players from Championship, but then another step up into Premier League. And you've also spoke about this approach you're taking now from academy, getting players through to first team. So what are some of the important factors that you've focused on across the program where you've gone, right, these are the areas we need to focus, especially with younger players, to really get them ready for that step up?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And like, that's another challenge, because last year we were preparing academy players to be Championship players, and now we're trying to prepare academy players to be Premier League players. You know, that's another level, you know. And I actually think probably over the last, in my 4 years of being here, we've probably done quite a good job of getting the boys to the level where they weren't far off the first team. You know, the 21s, 18s, they weren't far off the first team. We didn't have a 21 squad here till 2 seasons ago, so that's even another thing, you know. So, but I think last season we got to a point where it's like, okay, I think these programs are comparable. You know, I think the academy program is comparable to the first team, and supported that with data and testing. And okay, actually, there's a gap here, and sprint distance across a week, we're not quite matching that up. This is how we need to improve in the academy to hit that. So we've just gotten to that point. We've just gotten to that point of tolerating the championship first team, and now we've got to take it up a level. And I think it's about refining that process now. Like those boys, we've probably got 5, 6, 7 players that are in our academy that are imminently could have a chance, you know, train around the first team, and now it's honing in on those 5, 6, 7 first of all to say, like, okay, how can we give you the best chance, and what are the gaps in your physical profile that don't match up to the first team squad? But also we know the intensity is going to go up, and we probably need to work a little bit more on speed and power, and maybe a little bit less on the extensive markers, because my experience of the difference between the Championship and the Premier League is it's a bit less basketball in the Premier League, but when it goes, it really goes, you know. So like you probably need less of that transitional running and the capacity to be able to do that, but you need to be sharp and athletic, and over 10, 15, 20 meters, be able to move your feet so you can accelerate, but then when you accelerate, you need to accelerate properly, you know. So I suppose maybe that's helped. We've gotten to a good point where they can tolerate that extensive work, and now as part of their development, we're sharpening them up a little bit, you know. But yeah, it's a great challenge. It's really, really fun.
Yeah, I bet. And just on that point, if anyone's not seen it, I've seen it over on Twitter this week, some of the camera footage that they've had on players in pre-season. And in terms your way you're talking about like the speed, and I know it's pre-season, but even still, you get a real insight, don't you, in terms of what you're actually preparing for? Yeah,
that's one of those moments when I watched the same thing, and I'm lucky to have been around football, but people that think, oh, I could do that, you know, and then you watch that video, and the amount of time you have on the ball is nothing, is it? You know, like and the speed of thought that those boys have to have, it really, really highlights that, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I was going to say as well, for obviously this step up now, if there was a need to sell the program or to develop buy-in with players, which I'm sure over the time that you've spent going through the leagues and developing the program, it's probably come less and less, hopefully. But if there was that need with these younger players, do you find that they're naturally just ready to take that step up? And I don't necessarily mean in stepping into the first team. I mean just in terms of their preparation in general, that they're right. I need to do the extra now. I need to step myself up physical and be ready because we are now Premier League.
Yeah, for sure. Like, and I think first of all, I think we've done a good job of pushing that as through the academy into the first team. And as soon as those boys drop into a first team training session, something switches because they realise, and I think there's a natural progression as a young pro where you come in as a first year scholar. Within 6 months, you realise the importance here, because we just hammer it, we just drill them away. Like, this is really, really important. And then I think when they train, they realise the importance of it. And then I think when we start having Premier League games and you're pitch side and you can see the speed of it, I think another thing will switch again, because there's one thing us banging on about it and telling them that this is another level, then the next thing is them seeing it, and I think when you see that live, and because we're lucky we've got a tight pitch, you're never that far away from the pitch at the Kenny, so you can see it really up close, the speed of movement and the athleticism of the Premier League. Like, you don't need to sell it. Not that we've got a great group anyway. Like, they're really good with that, and if anything, they kind of come and grab you. They come and grab you and say, "What can I do? What do I need to do?" And I had that yesterday with two players, coming up to me and saying, "What can we do extra?" So it's a great culture that's developed, and again, it just comes from the club. It's not you can't take credit for that ourselves. It's the culture of the football club. It's brilliant.
You'll obviously get the insight this year into the Premier League and, again, the speed of the game and all the rest of it. But do you find that 21's role and witnessing the players and the matches that you've been involved in there has even enhanced you even more or prepared you even more as a practitioner to then have that discussion to players? Because that's essentially what you're comparing to, isn't it? These are some of the best players in the world. Yeah.
And every time I go on camp, the first session, I'm always like, wow, okay, because it's just a shift, it's a step.
Yeah.
But ball speed, control, touch, everything aside from their actual physical attributes, like the how quick the ball moves and then how quick you have to move your body to deal with that situation, is definitely a step up. But it's a nice constant reminder for me, that okay, that's the level. I think you could probably, if you're in the Championship, you think, this, I know it'll be a step up, but it's a step up. But like, wow, it's a proper step up, But one of the really interesting things from the tournament was the Euros tournament. I think because the boys were technically brilliant, they did really well. The intensity of those games was low. The 21s games, for anyone that saw it, like, it wasn't basketball. It was a little bit slow go, but we controlled the game really nicely, which helped us control the intensity of the game. And the byproduct of that was because we ended up having 6 games in 17 days. The boys could play 5 of those 6 games in 17 days because the physical toll from each game wasn't that high, just because technically they controlled the game and they did brilliant, So and maybe the training, the intensity of the training then prepped them for that. It didn't take that much out of them because we trained at a real intensity. So the game didn't feel that hard because it was never that intense,
Yeah. And I'm guessing there's lessons to take from, even though that's a really intensive period, isn't it? I'm guessing there's lessons to take into this coming season as well.
Yeah, for sure. Like, one of the things that everyone's really looking forward to here is having 1 game a week. Like, we haven't we haven't had that. So like the ability to train Saturday to Saturday and have a proper schedule without having games every 3 days, we can get some proper work in there. Speaking to a few of the lads here that have played at the Premier League, and asking them about the physical cost of it, like, they say it takes a lot more out of you. Like, each game takes a lot more out of you. So you rest when you rest, and then you train hard when you train hard, and it becomes a little bit more like that. Whereas because the Championship's every 3 days, it has to be kind of level. Whereas Premier League is going to be a little bit more undulating, I think, in our training load, because work really hard, then we need to recover really well. So yeah, I think the recovery was massive at the Euros. It was huge part of our prep and everything, because there was a general thought that if we recover better than every other team, we should do better than every other team. You know, if we keep winning games, and we do a great job of that here actually, because we've had to in the Championship. So we're just gonna turn the dial up on that again. You know, the post game recovery.
Just going into the next season as well, do you find that, talking about those sort of Saturday weeks, or the single game weeks, or whatever it's going to be, those players that are probably just outside that starting 11 that need that development, possibly some of the younger players, are you looking at it thinking, actually, this is a real opportunity to get more development into them this season, because you don't have that relentless schedule?
Yeah. The players that are playing and the players that aren't playing, both of them, you know, like there's been a few players that we've really wanted to do extra like speed and power work with over the last few seasons. Like when you're playing every 3 games, you're kind of constantly under a little level of fatigue, or you're recovering. Like doing speed and power work, you can't do that, you know, like you can't even gym based. You're not going to be working at the velocities you need to get proper power adaptations, you know. So you just end up having to sacrifice it. But yeah, it's going to be really nice to be able to get some work in, you know. That's what we love, you know. We love working and getting players better, you know, physically better. So it's a really nice platform for us to be able to do that with the Saturday to Saturday.
Brilliant. James, it's fascinating, really fascinating. I could probably talk about this all day, especially that sort of club national team comparison. I think it's amazing. So thank you for covering that. What I would say before we just go on to the quick fire questions in a second, Jared was on the podcast way back, episode 72. So anyone that wants to go and check that out can go and listen to him. I know it's been a long time since then, and hopefully he'll be back on soon. But yeah, anyone that wants to go and listen to Jared and some of the work that he's done at that point, they can go and check that out. Are you happy to go on some of the quick fire questions just to wrap us up?
Yeah, let's go for it, man. Yeah.
So I always ask the first one, who've been some of the biggest influences on your career so far?
So I worked under Nathan Gardner at Tottenham. Nathan Gardner was the head of sports science when I joined, and he was amazing for me. Like as a practitioner, as a mate, you know, look, we're still really, really close. He's kind of honed me into the practitioner that I am now. Yeah, just a good guy, diligent, hardworking, amazing on the grass. So yeah, without him, I wouldn't be where I am, I don't think. And then really lucky to work with Mauricio Pochettino and his coaching staff. Jesus Perez is his assistant manager, and it was brilliant. Showed us at the club another way of working and conditioning and working in the gym, and did a really great job of kind of marrying an English way of working, conditioning wise, with a European way of working, and so it was a great program. And the Chelsea guys, hopefully if they're still in that, they're lucky to have that. And then more recently, Ben Rosenblatt's been amazing for me. Ben's been brilliant over the last 18 months. Like he's one, I think he's a top practitioner. Two, he's a great guy. He's a great leader, really emotionally intelligent guy, and really provided me with like good scaffolding to take that 21s role, but let me run it. So like he managed me really well. I can't speak highly enough of him. Yeah.
Awesome. James, what would you say your biggest strength is as a practitioner?
I like to think a kind of an emotional, intelligent leadership skill. I think works really well with staff, players, but also coaches. You know, I think I naturally like to think that I'm quite good at that and quite able to work with players and read them and get a good buy-in from them because of that. You know, and then I think like it goes without saying, I think you've got to be good on the grass. You know, you've got to be good at doing the work outside. You know, you can be a great leader and good with numbers and all that. But working under Nathan at Tottenham, he was brilliant and taught me so much. You know, so yeah, I'd like to think that the work on the grass is all right.
Brilliant. If you were able to speak to the James back coming out of Loughborough Uni, freshly qualified, what would be your top bit of career advice?
I think it's it sounds a bit cliche and it sounds a bit obvious, but like just dive in. You know, like I think there's everything. Dive into everything, and if it feels scary, it's probably the right thing to do. You know, and
Yeah,
like it's something which if anything feels a bit big, you know, it's like no, that means it's right. You know, dive in and do it because you might struggle and you might not be great, but you'll learn so much more. You know, staying comfy is okay for a bit, but like for too long, you're not going anywhere.
yeah, that's great advice. And then just finally, we talk about CPD, continued development as a practitioner. What's your approach to that now?
It's really interesting because I think it's changed over the last 8 years. You know, at the start, I wanted to get as many badges as I could and dive in and go to different courses and soak everything up. And then I felt like I maybe hit a bit of a wall with that, or maybe like there was a saturation point, and I really liked going to conferences and picking up little bits from people and speaking to people around that. And now I've come a bit more full circle around to doing jobs and getting stuck in, you know. So England's been an amazing CPD for me.
Yeah.
It's been an amazing, like I've learned more than I would on any course or anything. So getting stuck in and trying new things along with speaking to good people and getting good feedback, I think that's the best CPD. Like if you're reflective and you kind of take on board improvements and keep trying to adapt, you know, then you're going to learn more than you're going to learn from anyone else, I think.
That's a really interesting point, especially how it sort of progresses through your career as well. How you start with a certain approach and then it changes.
Yeah, and I think it's probably right, isn't it? That at the start you just soak everything in and take it all in, and then it gets to a point where you decide, like, I think I've got the majority of the information now, and now I need to decide what I like and what I don't like.
Yeah.
And then probably the last few years has been like, okay, let's implement that and work out if I like it or I don't like it, you know, and just by doing rather than listening.
Yeah, brilliant point. Absolutely brilliant. James, this has been fantastic, mate. Thank you very much for coming on.
Pleasure.
If people just want to keep up to date with what you've got going on, or they might want to reach out, ask questions, is there anywhere you direct them for that?
Yeah, I suppose Twitter's probably the best place for that. So, my goodness, I've got to remember it now. I think it's @_James_R_ something like that.
I'll post it in the show notes so people can catch you on your Twitter. So yeah, perfect. Brilliant. No, but thank you very much, mate. I really appreciate it. Obviously, it's been an incredible season, and all the best going into next season as well.
Thanks, man. Let's have a go.